Good day, everyone. How are you? Taking a breather. Sit down. Take a couple tokes off the pipe. Try to handle the heat. Gather some thoughts. I suppose if I were to identify a title for this video, it would be, are there any subjects, let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? Not just controversial, but are there any subjects that are considered forbidden to discuss? And I would have to say instantly, of course not. No. Anything that can be a subject means that it is a subject due to the fact that it's either an object or an idea or a theory. But everything that's discussed has purpose. Otherwise it wouldn't be discussed. It even goes back to the video I made earlier about small talk. Sure, small talk's important too, because it always leads into something deeper. You don't meet somebody on the side of the street and say, hey, how you doing? My name's Carpo. So what do you think about epistemology and, what is your philosophy on existence? The reason why we start with small talk is because we want to see where a person stands before we delve into a question that they may or may not even understand or be interested in. But when we get into a deep conversation with somebody we know, there's generally no forbidden turf. You can talk with your friends, if they're good friends, about just about anything. However, the limit is when you start to tell them things that you think they should do to improve themselves. For example, you learn to just bite your tongue when a person around you does something that maybe is annoying but not a bad thing in general, just something that you find offends you or bothers you, but something that may not offend or bother others. And this is what we call tolerance. This is how we learn to tolerate one another. We can even tolerate each other, and we have completely different religions and belief systems. Christians and Muslims can talk and enjoy their conversation in depth, and may even get into the two things that they say never to discuss, which are politics and religion. And since I was young, I've always heard that in the workplace. They'd say, two things you never discuss in the workplace, politics and religion. Or two things you don't discuss at the bar, politics and religion. Therefore, I made it my point in life to discuss as much as I can about politics and religion. Because I figured the only reason a person would avoid discussing it is if they're trying to avoid conflict. And if there's conflict that would arise, it would arise because somebody is wrong. Not always. Sometimes they're both wrong. In other words, the Christian arguing with the Muslim may have that problem of believing that my God is the correct one, your God is the wrong one, and neither one of them can be proven or disproven, so it becomes banter nonsense for a lot of people. They won't even argue against religion if, say, they're an atheist, because they get to the point where they know it's not going anywhere. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Certain issues aren't discussed merely because they don't go anywhere. The question is, are there any real subjects that are forbidden? I won't hold back from talking about politics or religion, because I have opinions on those things, but I still am open enough to say I don't really understand the deepest needs of each individual and why they may choose a religion that they choose. And people who are religious aren't just stupid because they chose religion. They're clinging on to something like we all are. So we also have politics, which, we all have our own political opinions as well. And you can't say that half of the nation's dumb and the other half's smart. We just have different values and different needs. So what is this one forbidden thing? It would be death. And that's something that keeps coming up over and over. And I've noticed it because when I have a conversation with somebody, I find myself getting into the depths of why people think the way they think, and the different opinions we have, and our values, and what we're really searching for in life. And we may even have a good discussion about where we come from and where we may be going, but the minute death comes up, physical death, people tend to kind of clam up. I've noticed in discussions with folks, as soon as you bring up something like saying, hey, you just got to conquer the fear of death, and they just kind of, well, and then they'll come up with their theory about what happens after death, or what the purpose is. The whole point is dealing with the fact that we're going to die, that we are going to die. And just saying that to people, a lot of people cringe. Like, why should I have to think about that? Hell, I've spent my whole life knowing that I'm going to die one day. Why should I sit and talk about it and make it a conversation, Well, because it's uncomfortable. And, of course, I have to get into the philosophy of why are we uncomfortable with something. And if we are uncomfortable with something, do we just bury it under heaps of nonsense and theories and hopes and dreams and faiths? Or do we actually bring it out in the open and really poke and prod it? Any theory, belief, or idea a person has, in order for it to be valid, it has to hold up to scrutiny. It doesn't have to be provable. It doesn't even have to be true. It just has to hold up to scrutiny. And it has to have value for the person and those around them. So believing in a religion may not hold up to scrutiny, but the person may not care. Certain scientific studies don't hold up to scrutiny, but people still believe them. This comes down to sometimes confirmation bias, where a person will selectively choose the things that agree with what they want to believe. But ultimately we get wrapped up in these little whirlwinds of ideas within our little groups, and what they do call echo chambers, which is an echo chamber when a person goes to a website or a blog and they post their opinion, and then all the people who post agree, that it only attracts people who are looking for that, because nobody else is looking to dispute that. Nobody's taking their time to look up something to argue with it because it's not worthy of argument, such as the flat earthers. Sure, there are plenty of arguments against them and people back and forth, but most people don't seek out the flat earthers to attack them. They just say, well, it's a minority of people who believe what they believe, and nothing's going to change their mind, nor does it matter if it changes their mind. And I think that's something important to remember is, does it even matter to discuss it? And when it comes to something like the forbidden talks, it does matter with religion, because people are trying to resolve the idea of what it means to be alive. With politics, it matters a lot, because politics are what drive our society, what put us in the hole or pull us out of it. I mean, the choices we make and the leaders we put in office and our representatives, all of this is very important, whether we like it or not. It is there. And so it's important to talk about. But with death, it's something that people figure, well, I'll deal with it when it comes. So therefore, let's not even talk about it. I've heard people say, well, I don't fear death. I just fear dying and suffering and dying while I'm dying, like dying a horrible death. And I've considered it like, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? You could be tortured, but what's the likelihood of that? Maybe you burn to death, maybe you fall off a cliff and suffer for a while. But your body has a natural ability to deal with pain. Releasing endorphins, which is endogenous morphine, which helps the body to deal with these things. But ultimately, pain only exists in contrast to pleasure, which is why utopia is kind of a joke, but why hell is also a joke. You could never give someone enough good, to make them always happy. You could never punish someone enough to make them always upset or always sad or depressed. In contrast, the small happinesses will become the big happinesses for those who suffer a lot. Something as small as like getting $20 or, getting lucky and having enough money to buy some food that day. Everything is perspective. So the issues that we talk about, when I say that maybe death is an important thing for people to talk about, for a lot of folks, they're far too busy to care about that. Maybe cultures who have different belief systems about what death is and their own perspectives on it. And I can't tell them they're right or wrong, and it doesn't matter as long as it's serving them. So in groups, we choose to talk about what serves us as a group. We choose to discuss things that we find important. So I guess what I'm saying here is that to keep an eye out for those things that appear important to people, and the things that people refuse to discuss, because those sometimes are the most important things.